Good morning, Winterview, back with another brief dialogue. Without any coffee in his system, throat a little dry, a little rough this morning. For his dear friend, Annastacey. This brief dialogue is on letting go, the subject of letting go. Very popular in spiritual circles, in pop psychology, in counseling even, the idea of letting go. What is letting go? What do we think we're letting go of? Do we actually let go of anything? This particular dialogue overlaps with another dialogue which I haven't really done. Maybe I should have done it before. Now that I think about it, maybe I'll just blend them together. And that subject is beliefs. Belief systems, if you prefer. Let's start with beliefs, and then move on to letting go. What is a belief? What do we think a belief is? Beliefs, surprisingly, are quite mysterious. We don't really fully understand them. Even in psychology, we say it all the time. Mr. Smith believes. Miss Jones believes. Mrs. Watson believes, and so forth. But what are we saying? On the one hand, we're saying we observe their behavior and we make hypotheses about why they would do that behavior. In other words, we think if someone was to do this behavior, it must be because that's what they believe is the behavior required. You can see, and this was from an earlier dialogue on the mind, because the mind works in cause and effect. This is another teleological projection back through time, where we presume or ascribe some causal agent or agency to a behavior. In this case, the prescribed or believed agent is a belief. Let's choose one to play around with. What should we choose? Come on, X. You can do it. Think of something spontaneously. Long period of silence while the cogs of Winterview's mind tick very slowly. Okay. I have a belief. I believe that people are fundamentally good. There we go. Now, Winterview does not actually believe that, but that's a very common belief that you might find. Well, let's not say common. Let's say in some circles you might hear that. I believe that people are fundamentally good. Now, once that belief is in place, we would expect a whole range of behaviors that match that belief. And the one behavior I can think of in buckets is compassion and understanding. You see, if you believed that people were fundamentally good, you would probably have more time for them, more heart, if you like, or more openness to understanding their behavior, more forgiveness too, perhaps. You would forgive transgressions perhaps a little more easily. Of course, we have no idea if that's true or not. We can somehow see our beliefs when we want to see them. We might say, and this is a model from forensic psychology, known as the Good Lives model, a little nod to Australian Tony Ward here. The Good Lives model proposes that criminals, or people committing crimes, are actually fundamentally, underneath it all, just trying to achieve something positive, yet not having the skills or the intelligence or the whatever to achieve those good and wholesome wants for themselves. They resort to crime. And so we see criminals engaged in criminal behavior, but secretly or deep down, all they want to do is be good. Perhaps they might be hungry, which is a fundamental human need, yet lacking the skills, the money, the abilities in some way to provide food, they resort to theft. So this belief somehow imbues a greater compassion for the behavior of the criminal. But is the belief true? Is it correct? Well, the funny thing is, at least in psychology, we don't care. We actually don't care if a belief is true. We just look at it as, how well does that model work for us in terms of what the outcome we want is. So if we want to rehabilitate criminals and we presume that they're fundamentally good, we just try and teach them better ways of achieving that fundamental good that they were trying to do with the criminal behavior. Perhaps we get better outcomes, less recidivism, less crime as a result, and so forth. Which means, yes, the good lives model perhaps had some benefit for society. But beliefs in general, across the board, you could look at them the same way. They are models or explanations of understanding behavior, our own behavior in particular. Another model in psychology is called sense-making. Sense-making is the idea that we look at our behavior and then try and figure out what were we trying to do with that behavior. Make sense of it in a way. We can do it as it happens, we can do it historically, we can do it in the future, imagining the future. We try and make sense of everything. And there are models of the brain which suggest that the brain is one giant sense-making organism. It's always trying to figure out why, endlessly. And so we come back to this idea that the mind, being cause and effect, is always trying to figure out why. So no matter what model we use, fundamentally it's a way of figuring out why. When you land on a belief, a way of understanding behavior, there can be a sense of peace associated with that. The organism itself does not like ambiguity, it doesn't like uncertainty. So even if a belief is false or has very poor basis in reality, once you land on it, there will be a concomitant feeling of relaxation perhaps, or peace, or a feeling of, now I get it, even if you're totally wrong. So the drive, you might say, in the appearance of the world is to constantly find homeostasis, equilibrium, peace by updating or landing on beliefs. But we also find that beliefs are occasionally unhelpful. That is, they might have been true or seemingly true at one point. The way of understanding the cause and effect relationship was true somewhere in time, but now we just don't really believe that anymore. It doesn't seem to make sense. So, for example, we often see in psychology very childish beliefs that were part of childhood, as is the way with most childhood beliefs, obviously, and yet the adult has still carried that belief forward into adulthood, where now it's not so helpful. When it's not very helpful in adulthood, what happens is the experience, or the qualitative experience of the adult life isn't particularly nice, doesn't feel very good, it's problematic. And so we might go to a counselor or a psychologist or someone who is just awfully clever, and we explore what's underlying our behavior, and we come up with this idea of there's a belief there, a way of understanding experience that doesn't really make sense anymore. It's really unhelpful. And then we decide, or we discover, that if we refine that belief we can modify it perhaps, or even discard it entirely. The mind will naturally release. It's like an energetic release of sorts, where it feels a sense of, oh, that's better, that was unhelpful, now I'm freed from it. So there's a sense of freeing up, which brings us to the idea of letting go. When it's seen fundamentally that all beliefs are arbitrary or made up entities, the world can suddenly seem quite unsteady for some. It's like, oh no, nothing is true. However, the corollary, I shouldn't use big words with that coffee, is also true. In that when there's nothing to believe, there's a sense of greater freedom now. So when in psychology someone is urged or encouraged in some way to let go, what it actually means is to look at an old belief perhaps that's giving you a negative or unpleasant experience and literally surrender that belief structure or modify it. Let's try and think of another example. We see it with very monolithic, static beliefs about how negative people are always judging me negatively. So we find often adults come in and they think everyone hates them. Everyone thinks I'm boring. Everyone thinks I'm stupid. That very, as I said, monolithic, like just really? Everyone? And it doesn't take too much, doesn't take rocket science to tease it apart. We can just explore it very gently, even on a rational level. We say literally, when you say everyone, do you mean everyone? I don't hate you. And there the belief now is falling apart. Well, no, not everyone, maybe some people. Who in particular, you might ask? Well, there's a few people in my family. Really? Who in your family? And so on and so forth. And we whittle it down, and then we find perhaps no basis at all, just a misperception entirely, where the person goes, oh, I always thought that was true, but now I see it wasn't, and it's let go of. Or, alternatively, you might explore a belief and find a grain of truth. Perhaps some people actually do report you as annoying and actually report hating you. So we come down to a more specific belief. Yes, Uncle Tommy said to me last Christmas, I hate you, I find you annoying. So there's one exemplar that would suggest some veracity to the belief, but perhaps it could be modified. Not everyone hates me and thinks I'm annoying. One person does, at least that you're aware of. The experience that follows is usually one of greater freedom, or a sense, if you like, using the word liberation in a different way, a sense of being liberated from your own beliefs. The other thing too is, and this gets a little bit esoteric, is the mind, or the brain, if you want to use that word, devotes psychic energy, as in mental energy, to the preservation of beliefs, and stays vigilant or on guard for threats to the belief structure. So if, for example, you have this pervasive, overwhelming, monolithic belief that everyone hates you or everyone's out to get you, imagine that in practical terms, walking around the streets, if you even bother. If you were to walk to the shops to get some milk, a very benign act for most people, for the other person with the fundamental belief that everyone hates them, that would be a very different experience. They would be on guard, they'd be vigilant for attack, ready to flee or fight or punch or whatever on the drop of a hat, because they're very primed, because they believe that that's true, that everyone is out to get them. That vigilance requires energy. It's not a idle standby mode. You actually, in a sense, devote resources. So for that person, the letting go of that idea or that belief will be felt with a massive surge of freedom, a weight off the shoulders, a weight off the chest, and so forth. That's what's commonly the experience that is hoped for with letting go. And that's what the idea of letting go implies. When someone is urged to let go, what they're essentially being told is to look at that belief, look at that presumed cause and effect relationship that you've formed perhaps as a child or perhaps through overwhelming learning experiences in your life, and see if it's true. Can it be let go of? Can it be modified? And so forth. The letting go of beliefs is somehow believed to be part of the liberation process, if you want. The I'm on my way to enlightenment because I'm letting go of beliefs. It's worth mentioning here that beliefs and liberation have no relationship to each other. You can keep all your weird and wonderful beliefs, your peculiar, idiosyncratic beliefs about the universe and esoteric spirituality and so forth, and still experience what we call liberation or enlightenment, because they're not related to each other. It's true, though, that people at we'll call it the point of liberation, even though it's not correct necessarily a way to describe it, will report a dropping of many beliefs. The reason for that comes down to the cause and effect model. Most beliefs are generally somehow cause and effect. And liberation is the sudden realization of the hollowness or emptiness of that model in general, or the realization of it's only an appearance, it's not real. When that's seen, it's very difficult to take beliefs seriously after that, any belief for that matter, although they still can arise and they still might serve function in the world or in the community in which you live. You might also just play along with beliefs just to get along, so to speak, not really fully believing in it anymore, but yet not wanting to upset the people around you. And that's another common thing that is reported on liberation. Anyway, really need a coffee now. I hope you found this useful or interesting in some way. This has been Winterview with another brief dialogue for his dear friend Annastacey. Comments welcome.